Hello and welcome. Good afternoon. I thank you for joining us today for GWTV's Wanna Grab a Coffee event. Today we'll be talking with Rudy Brioche, the VP of Global Public Policy and Policy Council at Comcast, but more importantly, SMPA Media Law Professor. Our moderator today for this discussion is Thea Lawson, GWTV's Director of Membership and Recruitment. We'll be talking today about media law and broadcast regulations. I'm Abigail Brubaker, the General Manager, and I would love to present Rudy Brioche and Thea Lawson.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Like Abby said, thank you so much for joining us today, especially on a Friday. And also a special thanks to Professor Brioche, who is sharing some of his expertise with us. So, without further ado, let's get started. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to just introduce yourself, what your work was prior to Comcast, working as policy counsel, and of course teaching at GW. So What did that path look like?
Wow. First of all, thank you very much. It's great to be here. I have to say it's a path that I didn't plan. I'm a strong believer in faith and kind of just putting things out there. And for me, it's been ensuring that everything I did, I had a certain degree of just having fun. I like working, but I also like at the same time having fun in the work that I do. I really like people. I like engaging with people. I found out that when I was after I graduated, I clerked for a couple of years, worked at a law firm, and I recognized that the level of kind of human interaction that I was getting just wasn't at the level that I wanted, frankly. It was a lot slower. It wasn't as fast-paced. I preferred something that was much more fast-paced. So I've kind of turned my attention more towards the policy space. I've always wanted to be a lawyer. I've always wanted to wear a fancy suit and to run into court. But I quickly learned that, litigation on TV is just that. It's just TV. Actual litigation itself is a lot of late nights going through paperwork, going through a ton of documents, reams of documents, boxes and boxes of documents, and that just didn't really excite me. I actually wanted to be in something that was much more fast-paced. I really wanted to make a difference. Wanted to get involved in just something that would actually make a difference. So I did some work on immigration work, for example. My family's from Haiti. Immigration is important. I spent time doing that. I found that to be incredibly rewarding, but not enough money, right? To be recognized. I also did some work with the Public Defender Service here in D.C. I continued to do public defender work. We're working with defendants. Again, great work, exhausting work, and at the same time work that doesn't pay the bills. There is going to be this theme about paying the bills because I'm very much of a child of immigrants and of peasants in many ways. So from that standpoint, it was important, at least my father always told me, it's great you're doing all these great things, but at the same time, you actually have to take care of your family. Got to take care of your mother, take care of your grandmother. That's been the drive for me. So I've been looking for ways to balance that. And the best way to balance it is I've been blessed to be able to do work that is interesting, exciting, and work that is that allowed some level of mobility. Because I very much do view myself as someone who is incredibly blessed to be born and raised in the United States. I am the original anchor baby in many ways, and I take great pride in that. So education has been important, and at the same time, some level of economic mobility, because that's the American dream. That's why my parents came to the United States, is to really pursue this chance for a better, living. People aren't crossing borders and going through just strife, simply because they want to be in the U.S. This is a special place, but it's a special place because of the opportunities. And so for me, I had to maximize the opportunities, but I want to maximize the opportunities in a way that actually, to have fun. And how fortunate and how blessed I've been to be able to actually maximize these opportunities. Well, probably not maximize. I've taken advantage of them, but didn't fully maximize. I probably could have been better, could have been much more successful. I could have been a contender, but instead, I'm a lawyer. But I've had such a, such a fabulous experience throughout my career. And it's been led by a number of things, but one of it has been led by this need for wanting to interact with people and wanting to make some kind of difference personally, family, and hopefully to have an impact on the people that I engage with on a regular basis.
That's excellent. Yeah, and I wanted to touch on, now your work with Comcast.
Yeah.
I think that, you were a part of Comcast family for a while now. How long have you been?
Well, you're going to date me, huh?
Sorry.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny. I've been with Comcast now for 15 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, which is a long time.
Yeah. So that's before it acquired NBC, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how would you say that Comcast has been impacted by taking on this huge media and entertainment company from a policy side as well?
Yeah, as I recall, the transaction, the NBC transaction was about $42 billion. Wow. Which is a lot of money, right? I think it still is a lot of money.
Yeah.
That was incredible. I had left the FCC. I'd been one of the legal advisors to Commissioner Adelstein for a number of years. That's why I had the good fortune of meeting great individuals who were in the media landscape. I won't call him out, but it's important that as you meet people, you actually really put your best foot forward, because you never know. They may offer you a job to teach at GW. So when I joined Comcast, we were just probably a few months away from actually announcing the NBC transaction. When I joined, it was pretty clear that Comcast had previously made an attempt to purchase Disney, and that didn't go through. That was it was never materialized into a transaction. It was still just a Wall Street rumor that was true but did not pan out. The NBC transaction was one that both Brian Roberts, who is the current CEO, and his father, Ralph Roberts, really viewed as that was going to transform the company. The company was already a national cable company because it had acquired AT&T Broadband several years before. That made it more than just a regional cable operator, made it into a national cable operator. But what people didn't know is that at the time, Comcast wasn't only a cable operator in the sense of, delivering video and broadband. It was also a content producer, because there were already certain channels that were owned by owned by Comcast even before. So you had a lot of sports nets that were actually owned by Comcast that actually had the rights, the sports rights. So Comcast was already in the business of content production. Not only content distribution. What NBC did was actually hyper that and just took it to a new level where you had both content production and content distribution really coming together in a way that we think is actually quite exciting to others, to the antitrust enforcers, the Department of Justice, the FCC, consumer organizations. That raised concerns around vertical integration.
Right.
So my job was to make sure we dealt with that. We had about 6 hearings. I was responsible for the 6 hearings. We had 4 on Capitol Hill, 1 in LA, the other in Chicago. If you can imagine, 6 congressional hearings for one transaction. Those were the good old days, I guess, right? And that's really where I actually kind of made my mark, to show that the management of those hearings. I had experience in the Senate, experience at the FCC, experience at the NAACP, so actually, and experience as a lawyer, bringing those together, those skills together actually really allowed me to kind of just show my stripes, and it's been good for me ever since. I'm still riding that high off of that, that experience over, I guess that was probably over like 13 years ago now.
Yeah, excellent. And along with all of these different broadcasters, there's also, of course, social media.
Yeah.
And I guess that sort of takes us into the meat of this, which is, media law and protections. And of course, you've got the First Amendment, and how does this play into regulating that? So I wanted to ask, how do you view, and it's a big question, the interpretation of the First Amendment concerning journalism, especially in a time when fake news and disinformation are very prominent topics?
Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah.
That actually sounds like a great essay topic.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll note that.
Thank you for that. I am going to have to use that as a topic. Well, first of all, I think the First Amendment is just the hallmark of America, really. I mean, there's no place on the face of this earth where we're going to go and visit to see just how individuals are free to express themselves in so many different ways. It is just absolutely amazing. That, for me, is actually what really just makes America such a special place. Is the opportunity for us to have ideas, to share those ideas, to disseminate them. And these are ideas beyond just words, right? I have a son who has actually shown me that First Amendment and freedom of expression is more than the way I've always thought about it, which is through some type of medium. His medium is through fashion design. And it's kind of like, wow, that kind of expression through fashion design. I thought he just wanted to wear my fancy clothes, but no, this kid actually wants to actually express himself through fashion and make certain, I think, very powerful statements. So I think the First Amendment is, if there's one thing that I would point to that makes the U.S. incredibly special, is in fact the First Amendment. So I revere it greatly. What I've tried to do is I try to actually, if you probably will recognize this in my class, I try to make sure I take the other side of that issue to say, how can we, isn't there a need for government to impose limitations on the First Amendment? And there are good reasons for it too. But the tougher challenge is to recognize that it's always easy to clamp down, but it is a stronger country is one that actually allows, freedom of expression, ideas to flourish, and then have the citizenry decide on the best way to move forward. And so the consequence is you're going to have ups and downs, highs and lows, but that kind of dialectic is what actually keeps things interesting, allows everyone to recognize that we're in this boat together. In other words, what I think, what you think truly matters, which means that we're going to recognize that we ought to have a system of education that is equal because, frankly, we are in this together. So you get the same vote that I get. So therefore, we should make sure that you are educated as well, because lack of education doesn't mean anything. You're still going to have that right. Economic opportunity is all part of it. So I view the First Amendment as that which makes the United States great, which makes the United States strong. And occasionally you have to suffer the consequences of that, which is you may have certain decisions not go your way, but it's far better than the alternative. The alternative is actually restriction, and I believe that the human spirit will ultimately find a way to express itself one way or another. So it's better to actually let it get out there, for it to be managed, for there to be sunshine, transparency, engagement, rather than trying to lock it in certain places and to allow it to fester, because eventually it will get out. And so you want it to get out in the way that is most constructive to society, which is an actual open, honest conversation. Because even the person with whom you disagree the most, there's something from which that you could actually learn. I had a good friend who said that you can get advice from a fool, and I believe that is to be true. That you could actually get advice from a fool. So let people talk, let people engage, express themselves, and there's a few bumps along the road, but that's the better course to take.
Yeah, absolutely. And how would you say platform liability sort of plays into that, especially with AI and hosting other people's comments? I know we touched on this in class, and as a part of Professor Brioche's media law class, I think you should all definitely take it. I'm not just saying that, but yeah, so platform liability.
Platform liability, that's the interesting one, because even the definition of platform is something that we are wrestling with. Are platforms just the social media platforms themselves, or platforms, say a broadband network? Is that considered a platform? Hosting providers, data centers. How do you actually construct the term platform? So, assuming that we're talking about just primarily, websites, online services themselves, those online services, there's a different set of responsibility, right? When we talk about the First Amendment, we talk about the First Amendment for individuals of freedom of expression. That doesn't necessarily mean that is the same right that should be accorded to individuals who are pursuing a commercial interest, right? Because we talked about the First Amendment as this democratizing element. What about individuals who see it as an opportunity for them to either engage in commercial activity for their own gain, or even for the government to actually put it in some type of structured format? I think that's a tough question because there is, with freedoms also comes responsibility as well, right? So how do we actually consider things such as protecting children? Protecting, part of this democracy that we want to have. How do we ensure that the information that's going out is information that is in fact accurate, that is real, right? Forget about accuracy, just real even would be helpful. So the question is, should there be some baseline? Should there be some responsibility? I'm not sure about the answer to that, particularly honest, because I go back and forth. I tend to be a bit more of I am a believer in the free market. I do believe the free market is actually connected to this freedom of expression. Where the free market I do produce is probably the best regulator out there. And this is based on my experience, that not that there's always a role for regulation, no question. But I do believe that the free market is actually one of the best regulators out there. But in the meantime, we need to take steps. For as an example, to protect children. I think children is always an area where, it's kind of like, you got to protect the kids one way or another. You have to protect some type of limitation. But even children have First Amendment rights, and even adults have First Amendment rights. So how do you do that in a way that allows adults to get access to this information free and clear, while at the same time protecting children? So I think there is a role for some measure of responsibility, accountability. Notification is always a good way. How do you provide notice to your viewers? Your sense of internal controls as well, because you have internal standards. It's not as if just anything goes, right? You ought to have standards for yourself as a company, as an organization that says these are certain things we're not going to tolerate. These are things that we believe are good. I think that's important. I don't think it necessarily should be imposed, but I think if you allow the marketplace to thrive, I believe that the goodness in people would actually, seek those types of opportunities rather than, to go for something that is, potentially harmful to society.
Great, thank you so much. I wanted to now segue into the future of media and policy, and with that comes the increase in emphasis on streaming. Working with Comcast, do you see a potential in divesting from NBCU, instead focusing on Peacock or other streaming services and digital media?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Well, first of all, there's no question that existing legacy media is retreating. I don't want to say failing, because even to this day, we still have a robust broadcast TV and radio system. I know none of you listen to broadcast radio or watch, broadcast, TV. But the fact is that there are still, a good number of Americans who actually rely on over-the-air TV to this day, over-the-air television. So the idea that broadcast is actually dead is not the case. Cable isn't dead either. I know you're not paying for cable, but I'm sure your parents are paying for cable. I still pay for cable. And so that model continues to work, because that model actually is that bundle that people usually criticize. That bundle, I think, is just a brilliant economic package, because what it allows is it allows other individuals with ideas who may not have the kind of sizable budget as major broadcast networks or well-funded cable programmers, give them a chance to actually create a network, to put their ideas out there. That to me is just, that's been one of the great things about cable. However, now we have actual streaming services, and individuals like, well, it truly is democratizing. Everyone can go out and just put their stuff online. But the truth is, how do you actually find it? How do you find it in a way that actually makes sense? Do you want to sit down and spend the next half hour just trying to decide what you're going to watch? Or you just want to know, you just want to be able to go and, people, I don't believe that people want to be their own aggregators. So I think people want a service to provide that kind of aggregation for them, because that's work to find quality content, or even if it's user-generated content, package it so that way when you sit down and you want to enjoy entertainment, you don't spend the first half hour just negotiating to find out what you're going to watch.
Yeah.
To me, that is so frustrating. And I fall asleep quickly. So
Right.
with my wife, we go through that, and I'm asleep within whatever you want to watch, because I'm going to fall asleep in 10 minutes.
Right.
So that is part of the challenge. Streaming is the present. It is the future. But streaming is also going to undergo a number of changes, because not all streaming services are making money. At the end of the day, you actually have to be able to generate revenue in order for you to create additional content. So you have different models out there. Netflix, it took Netflix a while before it actually truly became a viable business. It wasn't guaranteed to be that, right? And now we have a slew of other, streaming services. And I gotta tell you, most of those streaming services are not making money, right? The idea is that you are trading analog dollars for digital pennies, right? So you need a lot more eyeballs to make up what you could have made up through a retransmission consent fee that the cable operators would pay a cable network. So that model isn't one that is necessarily going to actually produce the kind of innovation of ideas of programming that we've had through cable. So as much as I recognize that streaming is the thing of the day, and it is part of the future, but we're going to have to right size it in order to truly make it a tool that individuals are able to actually use, and you're going to actually provide means by which you could really get competition into that space, because it's really difficult to actually capture eyeballs through a streaming service. It takes a lot of time and effort. Netflix did it primarily based on volume, just the number of programs that are out there, you're able to get it. But now in this kind of hyper scale world we live in, there's a bit of a challenge. So I think Comcast is experiencing this. There was an article just the other day suggesting that there may be a potential spin-off, which is where you're getting to. As of right now, it's just a rumor, so we'll have to see how that pans out.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. But it seems like networks seem to be in hot water in the news lately. Just to name a few, Trump has obviously called on the FCC a number of times to take away broadcast licenses of the fake news outlets, which includes NBC in his definition. Yesterday, it was announced that Sony Pictures is suing CBS for its distribution practices. It feels like it's going on and on. Do you think this is indicative of more legal challenges being levied against broadcasters and news outlets in the future?
No, not at all. No, I think honestly, first of all, you've always had a lot of lawsuits out there. Organizations are suing each other all of the time. I think it's healthy, in fact, because this is part of the way our system operates, right? Where things don't really stand still. So you engage in hardcore negotiation for programming, for talent, and I see these these cases as just another form of competition in many ways. So that's actually part of the process, and I wouldn't lose too much sleep over it.
Very reassuring. Yeah.
Take that to the bank, by the way. Right?
So looking ahead as a bit of a final wrap up in our last section here, what do you see as the next major public policy issues that are really going to shape the media landscape in the next decade or in 4 days
Wow.
when somebody wins
Yeah.
the election?
Boy, that's a. First of all, thank you for that easy question. I will be sure to return the favor.
Oh gosh, just
I
submitted
will
my
be sure to
midterm.
return the favor for sure. That is really a tough one.
Yeah.
That is really a tough one, because it is easiest to point to, say, Section 230 and say Section 230. And I was thinking Section 230. There is no way that a Trump administration, in light of Elon Musk, his time and effort, so Section 230 protects X in significant ways. But yes, Section 230 has been, a matter of kind of like political strife, Democrats, Republican, each wanting to reform it for different reasons. In fact, in the Project 2025 plan written by Commissioner Brendan Carr, reforming Section 230 is part of that. So I think that everyone believes that Section 230 needs to be reformed. No one's quite sure exactly how it should be reformed, which means that it's the perfect thing to not get reformed and for there to be no action whatsoever, despite the fact that there is a need to do so. I think the best way to look at it is from the standpoint of competition. There is a desperate need for there to be increased mergers, consolidation in the media landscape. Because media landscape really thrives on scale. And as of right now, you have very few businesses that have the kind of scale in order for them to actually be able to reap a profit. So whether it's Disney, whether it's Netflix, whether it's Comcast, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Hulu, scale is important. So Paramount is having some challenges. We know that there's been negotiations between MGM and some others. So I think that there is a need for actual transformation of the marketplace, and that requires some level of consolidation. And the hope is that whatever happens in the next few days, that you will have antitrust enforcers who recognize that that is actually necessary in order for us to continue to have what I think is, of the best, media business in the world. But you need to allow these businesses to reap a profit in order to produce the content. Content is expensive. Talent is expensive. It does reap back. I think it brings a great deal of benefits to communities. But you need to allow businesses to combine in ways that it actually makes sense. So I think that there is a need for consolidation. It's not coming from this is not a Comcast position. Right. This is my own personal view, that you need to have that. And there needs to be a climate that allows for a responsible combination of various media assets. And at the same time, certain public interest obligations that are associated with it. Right. Because media doesn't just stand by itself on its own. I do believe there are certain responsibilities that you have. And part of that responsibility is to provide quality news and information, because an informed citizenry is absolutely essential. So we don't want everyone just paying attention and watching, cat videos. Right. Not that there's anything wrong with it, right? There's nothing wrong with it. But the fact is, you need people who are much more informed, and media should have that obligation to perform, to provide quality news and information to the citizenry.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. And as a final note, most of our audiences, if not members of GWTV, are student journalists interested in going into broadcasting. So I was wondering if there were some things that we should be thinking about or know before getting into this industry.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the industry is changing. There's no question. The industry requires journalists to be a lot more entrepreneurial than ever before. So the idea is not going into one place, sitting there for 15 years and just expect. You're going to have to be much more of an entrepreneur. But I have to say, though, at the end of the day, it really is about, it's about your passion. It's about that thing that makes you wake up every morning and say, I'm going to go out and compete and run. That, to me, is still fundamental. That is key. That is important. I think the riches comes because you'll be able to have that sense of energy, that sense of passion. You want to take that extra step, and you'll be able to make a good go at it. All different forms of media, but at bottom is about good quality journalism. So focus on that, and that should be part of that passion. Searching the truth, getting that story, looking for ways to make a difference, I think is important. And then be prepared to be a lot more entrepreneurial than, say, prior generations are, because that's going to be required. And you already have this effective tool in your hands, your phone, which is more powerful than any computer that your parents dealt with. So you'll be able to use that in very effective ways. And the very last piece is, of course, artificial intelligence. That's something that you really have to immerse yourself in and to learn how to use now, because it is a tool that everyone is going to use. It's going to be something, I think some people are going to use it in ways that are effective. Others are going to use it in a way that's just going to pretty much, I think, is going to harm their careers as far as being able to really produce good content at the end of the day, because that could be viewed as a competitor, but that is in the hands of everyone. So how do you distinguish yourself? And I think that is going to be driven by the thing that still connects us as people, is that we are fundamentally spiritual beings, right? We want to have that kind of sense of connection, that sense of relevance. That's what you're going to bring, that there's no AI system is going to be able to duplicate that. So, and that requires a real connection to your humanity. And I don't say that just to be flipped about it. I really do believe that the reason why I enjoy the things I do is because I'm interacting with people, living individuals, and you're bringing relevant stories to them. AI is not going to do that. You'll be able to feed it information in order for it to produce something. But as far as that kind of sense of spirit, that sense of relevance, that still comes from one person, and that's from the human. That's come from the human being. It comes from the human soul, and I think that's what's important. So make sure you tap into your power, which is that sense of creativity you have within, that sense of power, that sense of passion. And I think that you'll be well said, whether it's on broadcast, radio, satellite, you name it, streaming services, you'll be just fine. But make sure you tap into that sense of passion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that excellent
No,
advice.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
That's the end of my questions, but I wanted to open up the discussion to our audience in case we had any questions that you had for Professor Brioche. So consider it opened if there are any.
They're scared. They are scared.
They're scared.
They're absolutely scared.
They're intimidated. Okay.
I'm just curious, what inspired you to become a professor, considering that you already have this position at Comcast?
Yeah. Honestly, first of all, the reason is because I actually really enjoy teaching. I'd had some experience before. When I graduated from law school, a thing that a friend of mine did was we created a bar review class, because we recognized a number of our friends had failed the bar. And we didn't understand that why, like someone like me who, frankly, probably should have studied harder for the bar, but passed, and other people who actually studied a lot harder didn't pass. And I was like, why is that, I think in addition to just being brilliant on my part, I was like, what's happening? And so this idea of actually how individuals learn was something that actually is really important to me, because people learn in different ways. And so what we did was we created a bar review course that actually focused on practice exams, practicing over and over again. And through that, I started interacting with people and started teaching. The course focusing on civil procedure, on secure transactions. You have no sense like what is, but it's Article 9 of the UCC and sales. And I just took an interest in kind of taking, what seems to be complicated terms, and to reduce them in ways that actually made sense to people, and then say there's ways for you to upskill to make it actually, you can actually make greater, you can make analogies, you can make comparisons, that's what actually makes, that is through experience and just learning. but at bottom, there's ways to actually reduce things in ways that actually just make sense. So through that and through my engagement with actually Sunday school, I've been a Sunday school teacher for about like probably 15 years now, and I found that to be extremely rewarding. So coupling those two together, and the fact that I've been kind of specializing in certain areas of law, I saw that there was this kind of this intersection where I could continue to do that, and it's been incredibly rewarding. It's a lot of work, but it is just to me, and having kids, if there's one way to kind of at least remain optimistic about the world, and to remain fresh, to remain on your toes, you need to engage, with the next generation, engage with these young minds, and that will just fuel you. So frankly, in many ways, I teach for a very selfish reason. I teach because the inspiration that I get from the students, whether these are students who are preparing for First Communion or for confirmation or for media law, what I get out of it is actually much more than what they get from me. I actually do get a great deal of inspiration from the other people that I interact with the students. And people used to say that, and I never really took it seriously, but the answer is really true. You really do get a great sense of inspiration from them. So that's why I do it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go next. This will be a little bit less open-ended than that one, maybe. I'm sure you might have some dealing with it. The FCC is currently kind of investigating that sports network collaboration that was going to be between NBC Sports, CBS Sports, ESPN. And I'm curious if you think there's a chance for that type of consolidation that you talked to happen in other industries, say a news network package where people get NBC, MSNBC, Fox News all together as well. And do you think the government should be more willing to allow that consolidation over the cable model? Or do you think antitrust is still important with those types of situations?
Antitrust is definitely important. That's kind of like, that helps control the rules of the game, and you cannot allow, you need to have a cop on the beat. Antitrust is very important. However, markets do change, and business models change. And frankly, if there's one area that the internet has had a major impact on, is really on the creation and distribution of information. No question, the internet has had an impact. So if the internet has had an impact on that, how do we actually consider that? As of right now, we haven't had, we haven't yet fully considered the internet's impact on the media landscape based on the rules that we've had that pre-existed the internet. So we need to have this kind of reckoning where we say, okay, the fact is that we want to make sure that we have diversity of information. We want to make sure that the ownership structure is one that actually invites, for competition. There is a public interest in ensuring that there's not this, information isn't controlled by just a handful of people. How do we balance that, recognizing that we've had probably the most transformative, technological change that's impacted that particular industry? We haven't really considered that yet, and it's not just in like cable, even in movies, for example. So even in the books, in the publication of books and how books are sold, music as another area, all these areas, and these are common because these are all media platforms that have been significantly impacted. I don't think the antitrust at least enforcement has fully considered that impact yet. And that was one of the bases of the NBC transaction, to say, we are competing against this. Therefore, we need to vertically integrate in order for us to be a stronger competitor. A lot of people believe that that model was going to fail. We think that model does well to a certain extent, but even that model is still, isn't one that, which is why you had the story about potentially the split, because even that model, isn't, guaranteed to work. So, yeah, I think we certainly need to evaluate that. We need the right environment. As of right now, businesses are not trusted. There's just this. It's just not a good environment for it. But I think it's desperately needed.
Great. Okay, I think we had another question over here.
Hi. Yeah. So you kind of touched on it talking about the First Amendment, but with AI, do you think there should be regulations for images, videos made by AI, and like how would you approach it if you do think
Yeah,
there should
interesting.
be?
So actually, I have been doing a lot of work on the development of AI regulations, particularly at the state level. And it's mixed because a lot of the state laws have been focusing more on discrimination than anything else, right? Discriminatory outcomes and how those outcomes could affect people. But more broadly, I think that I think the answer is yes, and we are going to need to have regulations around it. I'm not sure that we actually have found the actual answers yet for it, or what form of. I think probably the safest way, the safest place that I think that we are now is having disclosure requirements, where to the extent that whether it's whether it's a written piece or a piece of artwork or whatever it is that was based on some form of generative AI, there ought to be some kind of disclosure. The same way that if you're engaging with a bot, there needs to be a disclosure there. So I think the disclosure regime is where we are right now, and that needs to work out more. I think as far as the AI systems themselves, the development of those AI systems, the White House was able to get a number of the major, AI companies to agree to a set of principles. And a lot of those set of principles are to say that they're going to ensure that their AI systems are tested on a regular basis in order to reduce bias, to reduce, hallucination and these other potential, failures. And also before that system is then shared or disseminated, in the public, there'll be some additional assessments, third-party reviews that would occur outside of just what that, what the developer, him or herself. And then the other issue is around how do you actually allocate rights and responsibilities between the organizations that are actually developing these models versus the organizations that are taking these models and they are adding additional information, making them much more specific to a commercial use, and then deploying the actual AI system itself on a commercial basis. These are contractual agreements that need to be worked out, licensing agreements that need to be worked out. Businesses are actually managing it now. And these contractual negotiations, some of them will be done right, other areas will not be. We have there'll be lawsuits for sure, like the New York Times suing OpenAI. To me, that's a system we have in place that allows for us to actually get the best outcome by allowing different mechanisms to make a run at it. Let the private sector negotiate and see what could actually be produced there. To the extent there are certain provisions that are that are unfair, over time those will be addressed and they will be remedied one way or another. One way they would be remedied is by going to the courts. Let the courts actually manage this. Let's get some information. Let's get a good sense. You don't necessarily need to rush to regulation, rush to statute, rush to actual legislation. That ought to be the last one. But to the extent that we are looking at legislation, I think disclosure, transparency is the best way to go, rather than the much more prescriptive standards. And then, of course, you have consumer rights. There are laws that actually, like the Colorado law that passed, does give consumers, certain rights, particularly when it concerns a high-risk use of the AI. And high risk is usually defined as some type of impact that will have some type of that would have some kind of impact on, on certain rights such as, education, housing, employment, those types of areas, because those are areas that are still, I think, areas in which that there is a legal right currently. But if it's for purposes of, selling products, making products more attractive to you, making services more relevant, to me, that's an area where, we should just have, we should just allow your businesses to thrive and to innovate and see what comes out of it. Between, private contracts, between litigation, I think that a lot of those issues could be worked out. And then on the back end, we have legislation to protect consumers, to provide consumers with certain rights. We talked about this in class the other day, where you have the right of access, right of correction, right of deletion. These are rights that are coming from the privacy laws that I think will provide some kind of baseline for AI regulation in the future.
Great. I think that sums up our questions. And with that, I mean, big thank you
Thank
to
you very much. Really appreciate it.
Rudy Brioche.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you very much, Scott, for coming out.
It's been really great. And I would be sure to take Professor Brioche's class next semester, media law, if you want to learn more. So great. Thanks again,
Take the class,
everybody.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.